Okay, so it's 11 o'clock and I'm going to slowly get going with today's webinar. Thank you so much everyone for joining us today. My name is Anja Padget. I am Head of ESG and Communication here at Delogue. And today we're going to talk about something that's really, really close to my heart, both of course working at Delogue, but also just in general as something that's so important for us to understand the importance of when you work in the fashion textile industry. So we're going to talk a lot about bill of material and the importance, etc. So what we will do, as per usual, I will just set the stage for why we are here, why we are joining us everyone today, and then I'm going to present my guest of today, and we're going to talk about a bit more into details about the bill of material, but also about what they do and how they use that data. There is always room for Q&A. I have the Q&A open, so if you have any questions during either what I say or during the conversation with my guest today, just pop it into the Q&A and I'll take them during the session or in the end, whichever fits. And then of course, as usual, I'll just present what's up next in terms of webinars, etc. So let's start by setting the stage. So as we all know, I think I show this quite a lot, because I think that's what's really impacting us a lot is these very many people sitting in the EU deciding on some legislation and thereby deciding on which actions are to be taken in the fashion and textile industry. And of course, that has a lot of impact. It also has a lot of uncertainty. And it also, of course, raises a lot of questions about how do we prepare, what do we prepare for, when we don't know everything yet, etc. So it's very much this a bit of uncertainty and probably also a bit of stallment in terms of how do we get ready and when do we actually need to get ready for. So we try our best as well here from Delogue side to try and enlighten everyone, to ensure that everybody knows as much as we can during this period of time, because of course existing as a company doesn't only revolve around meeting these requirements, but also driving a business, running a business in the daily. So it's about sort of combining those two worlds together. Now, it all sort of started with this circular textile strategy, which we got to know quite a few years ago, and that was sort of the breaking point for everyone to see that, well, the EU has some goals for the textile industry in Europe to ensure that we meet certain requirements, that we work in a different way, etc. So that was sort of the starting point for what we're seeing today. What we're seeing will come now, have already come, and will certainly hit us even more the further we get along in this plan until 2030. So this is sort of a picture of what I think many of us are feeling, sitting in the brands, sitting out there in the industry, trying to sort of grasp, understanding it, all of these abbreviations, all of these different things that we really try and understand. What do they mean? How do they impact us? How do we then need possibly to change the way we work internally in the company and with our suppliers? So it's very much this massive hit of legislation and new words and new abbreviations that we need to understand in our daily work, and it is very much the sort of wide picture of what we're seeing, but it's very much about understanding what that means in the daily life, because that day sort of continues and keeps going. So how do we implement this in a way that it becomes a daily task for us, a daily reminder for us that we need to do something about this. Now, I will focus quite a lot on the ESPR today before we dive in to my guest today, because that is one of the things that we have now gotten an update on. So what I will just briefly for the ones who haven't heard about it, or maybe haven't heard the details of it, on April 16th this year, we finally got sort of the working plan for the ESPR. So that was revealed for everyone, that we could now know, well, what are the goals to make products in the EU more sustainable and circular. So this working plan, well, it's not only about the digital product passport. That's sort of a part of it, and that's one that a lot is talking about in their daily life. How do we prepare for this digital product passport? Because that's definitely a new way of working. But it's also about sort of a more general rules in the ESPR that they really emphasized a bit more in this working plan. Now, we're still waiting on the delegated acts, because the ESPR, as we know it, is for all products in the EU. So we're still waiting on these delegated acts to ensure that we know what will that then impact specifically on the textile industry. What do we need to prepare for? Because of course it will be different for the textile industry compared to other industries. So there will be differentiators that we need to be aware of. But it does set sort of an outline for how it will run during the next 4 years. And it prioritizes which are first. And I think we all are very well aware of that right now the top priority is textiles. One of the top priorities are textiles. Footwear, which we until now have heard would be in the same, is not going to be in the first round. So it's primarily the textiles that will be the focus. And I will just briefly also dive into that, because of course it also states some of the very crucial things that we then need to focus on, up until we get these delegated acts. What will the ESPR be focusing on? Now, one of the things that I think is quite crucial to understand is that the digital product passport will now be linked with a new ESPR label, and that actually includes this revision of the textile labeling regulation. Because the textile labeling regulation were, prior to the working plan, quite late in the sort of legislation timeline on when they will revise this. Now they've sort of bumped it up. So the textile labeling regulation will come a bit earlier. Because the one we have right now, the one we're working from right now in the textile industry, is from 2011. And I think everybody can agree to the fact that that is quite outdated in terms of how it should be today, both in terms of which fibers we're using. It doesn't really state that details in how do we actually incorporate when we're working with organic materials or recycled materials, etc. So it's quite nice to know now that they will focus on doing a new textile labeling regulation, which will link together with the digital product passport as an ESPR label. So it'll be much more, we need this sort of to be able to know how do we mark our clothing in the right way. Especially for the end consumer, to better understand what product are we purchasing when you are an end consumer. The working plan also states that this ESPR label will likely have information or need information regarding the carbon footprint, regarding the water usage, and then of course these circular principles that is also mentioned in the strategy. So that's the durability, repairability, and recyclability. So it does state that this ESPR label will include some of these circular principles that is stated in the strategy. It also mentions something about a rating system, not specifically as per se, but it does mention this rating system, which could mean that will see something similar to this energy label that we have on light bulbs, refrigerators, and so on. So it does sort of emphasize that we might have this rating system, which will then give a categorization on where do you meet the different criterias. It suggests that this could be powered by something called the PEFCR method, which is sort of a standard for measuring environmental impact. So for now, that's a voluntary thing, but it does mention that this might come into force, and this measuring, luckily it's a standardization of it, so it will mean that everybody has to calculate in the same way. That's really good. Right now, we're sort of seeing a different way of doing it. It does state that there will be a standardization of it, so that's really, really good for everybody. And why am I then telling you all about this in today's session? Well, that's because right now we are in a state where we sort of know what does it take to measure environmental impact? What does it take to lighten these durability, repairability, recyclability, the circular principles? Well, that really starts with a detailed bill of material. That's sort of the key work that needs to be done in the textile industry to ensure these bill of materials are fulfilled and useful, so that you can after that, or use that data in that bill of material to do the calculations. So that really means that the bill of material really becomes a key factor in working and getting prepared for all of this. Because as I stated earlier, because the delegated acts aren't specific yet, many of our customers as well are really asking us, well, what can we then do? What would be our prioritization right now? And well, that is the bill of material. That is the key to getting started. I think a lot of companies are, of course, struggling with this, because how detailed does it have to be, etc. We'll get into that with my guest as well. But it just really emphasizes the fact that the more detailed, the better. So that's sort of why we're bringing it up today. So the bill of material in Delogue and any other PLM system, or if you have it in an Excel sheet, it's really crucial for the product's success. That's really the ingredients for a product. So that's how you work with your suppliers to ensure that you get the right components that meet the right criteria for your brand and for this legislation. So it's really about, when you have a bill of material that is precise and concrete, then you can use it. Then you can use it for your company to ensure that you get what you want out of from your suppliers. So it really does, it sets sort of a standard for how do we work with our products in all of in what it needs to consist of. In Delogue, we of course have the bill of material as a part of the tech pack. So it states, it can state everything that is included in the product, every detail that is in the product. And of course, we have done it in Delogue with a component library, so that you can ensure that you have even more data. So you have a lot of data in the bill of material, but the bill of material can extend, or the components are linked to a library where you can have even more data to be even more specific on the weight, the width of the fabric, the composition, of course, the weight of the fabric, and so on. So it's really about ensuring that you have as much data as possible. And one of the good things is that, of course, in Delogue, you are also able to get your suppliers to help you with all of this data, because we are very well aware, and I think everybody's well aware of the fact that data comes, or a lot of the data at least, comes from the supplier. So we need to ensure that the suppliers are able to deliver that data to everyone as much as possible. And that's, of course, also what we focus on a lot in Delogue. Now, with that said, I would like to introduce Gustav Bang, who is the CEO and co-founder of Complir. Now, welcome to you, Gustav. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the great introduction. Hi, everyone.
So, well, I would just first of all like you to introduce yourself, of course, and introduce Complir. What is Complir?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my name is Gustav. I'm a software developer by training. I spent the last 5 years in startups, especially in the legal tech space, where we rolled out AI for legal professionals. And a small year ago, I realized with my co-founder Tine that legislation and regulation is more relevant for companies than just the law firms. And we spotted a trend for especially for companies that sell physical goods, consumer goods, but also textiles, fashion, furniture, cosmetics, that you have to comply with more and more complex regulations, both here in the EU, but also on the international scene. And this complexity is something that we saw an opportunity to be able to solve with the AI technology. So that's what we've been building the last year together here in Copenhagen with retailers like Flying Tiger and Kong Sløjd and the likes. So we're very happy to be working with Delogue as well. All the stuff you just said about, Anja, the data that you guys are now expanding to be able to actually have enables us in Complir to do a lot of cool things when it comes to product compliance.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's start from where I sort of left off in terms of product development, bill of material. Can you sort of just explain sort of the bill of material in a context of this fashion, lifestyle products, especially? Why is it critical for documents from these early stages of product development?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we think of the bill of kind of the DNA of a product.
Yeah.
It enables you to do a lot of things, not just in relation to compliance, but actually also being able to communicate better with your suppliers and have more insight into your supply chain based on materials and components and the inputs that you have in your products and your product development. So I think having a bill of materials, having a system around your bill of materials can actually enable you to shorten your time to market, for example, but also enable your employees to work more cross-department to ensure quality and safety and compliance down the line. And I think we're going to talk more about what compliance means in the future, which is actually enabling you to sell more instead of just having it as an afterthought. But the bill of materials really is essential to all this work.
And I think in relation to that, and also what I mentioned in terms of that it is something that we of course also at Delogue really talk about. You have to have this detailed bill of material. It's really important to you. Can you mention some of the sort of typical consequences if you don't have that?
Yeah. So the most obvious one, of course, is that you risk late stage surprises. Because the thing is, you only realize things that are missing way further down the line, and that's usually too late. So you also often you get surprised because of lack of data, right? Data gaps. So the bill of materials is really making sure that you ask for the right data from your supplier and that you have the data stored, not if, but when you will need it.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I think also, as you mentioned with the suppliers, that it's such a crucial part of the collaboration between the supplier and the brand, right? That this bill of material is fulfilled together with them.
Exactly. And I think so we can have a very concrete example is your bill of materials also feeds into other documentation. So for example, your declaration of conformity.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that documentation, or you can argue, you might not be able to sell your products in a specific country. You might have a full container of goods that can't get in. Basically, it's a recipe for potential delays or even product recalls.
Yeah. And I think also now we mentioned the suppliers, but what about internally? Are you experiencing something in terms of the internal sort of importance of this bill of material?
I think it's a great communication tool, really. Because all the way from the beginning, when a designer or a purchase procurement department creates the product and actually creates what we see as a very initial version of a bill of materials, we can then use that as sort of the source of truth that is used to communicate across departments, right? So the whole process of actually being able to sell your products goes cross department with a lot of colleagues having to do different things, sometimes at the same time and sometimes after each other, right? So the bill of materials is a great way of actually communicating how far are we in order to sell.
Yeah. And I think maybe we've already answered this one, but in terms of this complete bill of material, does it make life easier? Also, in the general sense, if we both talk suppliers, but internally, and then also what you guys do, if we sort of take the leap to what Complir does it make life easier?
Yeah, it definitely does. So we do very specific workflows for, say, labeling or translation of compliance texts. And the way we do it, we process a lot of data, but we usually actually get data from elsewhere, right? So from Delogue or another PLM or an ERP system or even Excel sheets sometimes. And the more structured that data is, the easier it is to actually do your compliance related tasks that is needed to be able to actually sell your products, right? So for us, it means figuring out what to label on both your packaging and your product and your manuals, also being able to have correct compliance checks in order to actually comply with European, but also international legislation, but also just stuff like knowing what to test a product for.
Yeah.
So being able to identify testing requirements, actually you need to have a bomb to be able to actually identify if there are any chemical risks in the product that you need to test for. So I think I view the bill of materials, sometimes it comes in an Excel sheet, but it's actually a very interactive document that when used in a system like Complir and Delogue, enables a range of new things that actually speeds up the operations.
Yeah. And that taps into what you do. So if you can, maybe not too technical, because I wouldn't understand it either. But if you can sort of, what does Complir do when you have the bill of material from anywhere, from Delogue or Excel sheets or anything? What do you then do?
Yeah, so we look for data that is missing, first of all, to make sure that we have sufficient data.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen, you guys know this as well in Delogue, that bill of materials requirements are on the rise, because it's not just about colors and sizes anymore. It's also about having the data. So first of all, we just scan for lack of information in the bill of materials. And then we basically upload relevant information. So that's usually the product name, campaign number, whatever is relevant for having a nice overview of your products. And then actually having a very process-based tool where you go through, okay, what is required for us to sell your products in Belgium, for example?
Yeah.
What do we need to know from our bill of materials? What do we need to deliver to be able to sell our physical products? What's the, when you sell products in the EU, there can be legislation divergence, right? So you might have Italy or Greece or certain markets having other kinds of requirements, and oftentimes you want to know that up front so that you can have the same product for all countries instead of having to have separate recipes for products. So having that kind of nice view of knowing exactly what the requirements are before you even get to figure out what the bill of materials should be, you should already know which kinds of materials you might use. So it's really a really ongoing process, because when you start labeling stuff, say you have sold your products in Denmark, now you want to sell them to Sweden, instead of having to redo all your compliance related tasks, you already know what should we be labeling for in order to actually sell our products in a new country.
Cool. And is that what Complir then gives the recommendations for how to change it or how to comply with the different countries?
As we do it in two different ways. So we both make it very transparent what you have labeled other related products in earlier, and then we recommend with an AI engine. So it's the kind of the way labeling is done today is usually by looking at what they have labeled all the other products as earlier. Mm-hmm. The thing is, because we build these AI engines, they get smarter over time. So when we've seen, say, 1,000 shoes, for example, we know what kinds of labels are required to sell footwear. And then we have the third part, which is footwear. What if regulation changes, and being able to actually update the relevant products in the platform so that you suddenly don't have to be so reactive about your compliance, but actually know upfront what you should comply with.
Yeah, nice. And can you give an example of any of your current clients or that you're working on implementing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're sitting here in the Flying Tigers headquarters. Yeah. We've been here for the full year, mm-hmm. where we partnered up to figure this out and build the platform with them. They have all product categories and they sell their products all over the world. So it was a great kind of partnership where we could both really figure out the in-depth domain knowledge of the specialists that they have, everything from packaging managers to chemical engineers to quality managers, compliance managers, and actually sitting very close to them and building this and iterating on how we both shorten their time to market, but also save costs, because here it's so complicated that you rely a lot on external consultants, and then also saving time for people and actually enable them to use AI, not just in ChatGPT or having multiple interfaces for different purposes, but having a consolidated platform where you can access information from other systems, but with the purpose of doing product compliance.
Yeah. And so when because I'm assuming actually having worked at Flying Tiger myself a while back, that their bill of materials are very complete. I remember seeing some of the bill of materials that they have, and that was a whole bunch of very long one compared, of course, also to the textile industry where they're a bit shorter. But what if they're incomplete? What does that impact you if they're incomplete? If you only have the main material, for example.
Yeah, so they've been fortunate to have that complete bill of material, because I think that would, if they didn't have that, especially here in Flying Tiger, you're very aware that we need to do things the right way. Especially here in Denmark, we have a perception of Flying Tiger that they sell fast-moving consumer goods. So they actually want to be not just compliant, but actually go beyond. For example, the sustainability department here is working really hard on reducing plastics and single-use materials, especially in their packaging. They've reduced single-use plastics in their packaging by 74%. So that's quite amazing. And they can only do this because of the insights into the bill of materials. So they could have still sold their products without a bill of materials, but they wouldn't have been able to actually have a company where you are enabled by your sustainability efforts, being able to communicate those efforts and not just comply, but actually use this as a business enabler, right? So before you're opening a new market, you already know what you have to do, instead of not being able to scale across markets. They open in 5 new markets every year in Flying Tiger. So they have a very strict process of how do we do, what should we be aware of when we go into these new markets.
That's really interesting as well, because I think a lot is about sort of how do we just stay compliant? We just need to have these regulations. And I think also Dansk Textile and others are also sort of trying to preach the fact that, well, this is also a business opportunity, right?
Yeah,
this is also something that I mean, it's a hard work in the beginning if you're not there where your bill of materials are fulfilled and have all of the information. Well, if you do that work, you can actually use it for more than just being a compliant. You can actually use it as a business opportunity as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. I tend to see it as that retailers especially are very focused on increasing revenue. So there's been many years where we've adopted technology towards increasing offerings to customers and consumers, and applying technology, being on more platforms, and actually having the heart of operations and retail stuck in the past in ERP systems and scattered Excel sheets. So having an intelligent BOM and actually uploading it to a PLM and using that information to do sustainability reporting, automation, quality control, etc., is suddenly a way to use technology internally, right? To make smart operations, instead of just running faster to increase revenues, actually starting to focus on how do we do things smarter internally. And that all starts with having an intelligent bill of materials.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, so AI is a lot on everybody's minds, especially I think on yours, but also just in general for something that everybody's sort of trying to grasp. And what can it do? How can it help us? Maybe also a bit scared about sort of what is this new technology? And it's just moving so fast to be able to follow. So can you maybe currently right now using AI with your work, bill of material and compliance, how is it working? How do you do it?
Yeah. So we have AI as like the foundation of all of our features, right? Because the thesis is, when you build a startup today, you want to position yourself for the future. And so as AI gets better, and it's getting better by the weeks now, our features also increases in efficiency. And they're very built up around specific workflows. So that's, if it's flagging risks or doing chemical risk assessments, we take information from either external or internal sources, and we combine that. This can be both legislation, but it could also be chemical information from the European Chemical Agency, and then combining that with your product data or your bill of materials, and then using AI for a very specific purpose. That's one of the things we do, and we build them very modularly, because our thesis is also this about not necessarily all kinds of retailers need everything right now. Textiles might have more use for care labels than a toy factory, right? Toy supplier. So we kind of look at the whole compliance challenge as that there are some overlaps, but there are also, when we look at AI, it's not necessarily strong enough if you want to do everything at the same time. So we want to keep it very, very focused on specific workflows. and actually automate end to end. So always having a last step of a human in the loop to validate whether it's a label or a risk assessment, but actually having everything around it automated so that we can get rid of the usually also boring manual work. And then there's another part with maybe, and it talks into your world as well with sustainability, which is that we have this engine where we've realized that we have all the product data. We also have sales and purchase data some of the times. And of course, some customers have been asking, can we do reporting with Complir? Because all of our data is there and you do AI. So it's a kind of an obvious low-hanging fruit. The thing is, a lot of the reporting stuff is not very harmonized yet. That's another story.
Yeah.
So we realized we could actually maybe change sustainability from being such a reactive thing to me being more proactive. So we use AI in the way where now, instead of having to go to a colleague from business intelligence, actually having an AI chat where you can write, give me the 10 products that has sold less but has increased our CO2 the last year. And then having an AI that actually accesses the databases and give you that information back so that you can use it when you argue with your colleagues from sales or when you need to do your reportings. So this suddenly enables the whole organization to actually access data in real time. And that can be for purposes such as reporting, but it could also just be, as an example, to be able to actually communicate to your colleagues why we should do something.
So what I'm hearing is that AI is actually, or you're using AI to, because we're looking at a massive change in an industry that isn't used to working with data in the way that we have. But what you're saying is that AI is actually there to help us use that data for something good.
Yeah, exactly.
And because the worst thing could be that we collect a lot of data, a lot of information, and then it's just static information that is just there. It's not something that we use for anything. But AI is actually the enabler to be able to use that data, use that work that you've done to something positive, whether it's business or sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, just 4 years ago, if you had a ton of data, the only real thing you could do with it was make a nice analytics dashboard, right? Something to look at. And now it's changing because of AI, right? So you can use AI to do workflows suddenly. That's the importance of data is now even bigger than it was. And I think also sometimes you have the data. That's what we see a lot, is that the data is there. It's just scattered and it's not very accessible. So it's also about, once you have that data, can we enable our employees with actually having systems to access this data?
Does AI find it, I'm talking about it as it is a person. For me, it's still a person. Does AI feel that it is better to have the data centralized, or is it okay if it's scattered in Excel sheets and I don't know where else? Everybody has a lot of different places, right? It's very different also from company to company, how you work with systems and different platforms, of course, but also Excel sheets, emails, blah, blah, blah. Does it make it more difficult for AI to work with?
It's a great question. It's actually the work of getting the data in is usually a process of integration. So it doesn't really matter whether it comes from 2 or 3 systems. A little bit more time to integrate those systems in. But once it's there, we usually differentiate between unstructured data and structured data. And unstructured is, if you're in ChatGPT, you upload a PDF or Word document, and then you start asking questions. That's unstructured data. Also works really well with ChatGPT. And then there's structured data, which is usually a database of information, or PLM product data that is organized by IDs or by product names. And we've found a technique to basically have the AI write SQL language queries to actually get the data directly from the database. We do this to avoid hallucinations. So if you ask something, instead of having an AI to try and figure out what the data says, we just actually make the AI request the data from the database. This is a new trend that a lot of companies are doing, that we basically give the AI tools to access the databases. And this is a really nice way to do it, because you can then guarantee that you have the correct data. And then have AI, formulate that in a nice way, making it accessible by just have human language, right?
Very nice.
You don't have to be a database engineer anymore to get data.
A little bit though.
A little bit.
Cool. Well, there is no question, so I'm assuming that you are answering the my questions at least very good. If there are any questions, just remember to pop them in. But we are almost on the end of this, so I always finish off these webinars by asking the very big question, which is future-wise, what do you see? So if you anything is possible, what do you think future-wise, both AI and everything? Where do you think we're going?
So there are two kind of controversial takes on where we are going, and I think I'm super optimistic, first of all, but it is something that we need to prepare for, because it is going to change a lot in the coming years. So first of all is we're now able to do a lot more with a lot less people. So this is something when you are going out to hire people, should we still look for the specialists, or should we look for the people that are generalists that can do multiple things, or maybe are in two different industries and have knowledge from different domains? Because once you give them access to AI tools, they can actually do specialist work. So I think that's what we think about, that we can build stuff now with 3 engineers, what just 2 years ago took 30 engineers to build. And the tools that we have as software engineers, we're seeing them kind of being replicated across domains right now. And so when we get inspired to build Complir platform, we just look at the tools we have available as engineers, and then we actually just do that for another domain. So it's in that way, it's quite easy to see where stuff is going. And then the other thing is that I think we see increasing services that used to be services like consultants work or stuff that you needed to do ad hoc is now being productized. So the kind of move away from having, consultant firms or legal firms having huge, one example I always use is I come from legal tech. In Europe, we have a $4 billion legal tech market, but you have a $1.2 trillion legal services market. And so a lot of startups right now are looking to actually convert that services market into products. Yeah. So imagine all the work that you guys are doing today that is either bought from external consultants or that are done by internal people. A lot of that can be automated, and a lot of that will be automated, but we will still have to have smart people driving these systems and being a facilitator of these different AI systems. And that's going to be, I think, quite changing the way we look at organizations also. Do we need to just increase headcount? Because that also, introduces complexity to have more people, right? Or should we have fewer people that can work across domains? And this is also, I think all of this is super true for retail. Retail has been early adopters of technology when it comes to, as we talked about in the beginning, right, increasing offerings towards consumers, and has actually been willing to adopt quite a lot of new platforms. And I think this pressure that is on retail is gonna push them to look at using AI tools and new tools to do things smarter.
Cool. So AI is taking over in a good way, I think. In a good way. I think also, I mean, everybody's experiencing sort of right now it's very much about learning how to use it in a good way to assist you in your daily work, so that the people aren't necessarily gonna be unnecessary, but they are gonna have to work with it to make the days smarter and more effective.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the goal is not to replace people, it's actually just to remove all the noise.
Yeah.
All this complexity that just happens in organizations.
Yeah.
So if we're lucky, we're going to get rid of all the boring, mundane, repetitive work and just have access to the right information at the right time.
Amazing. Good note to end the webinar. So I'm just going to share my screen again to just end it up by, there we go. Let's see if it works. There it was. So thank you again so much, Gustav. It was amazing to just dive into the AI world, which is still quite new to some in the fashion industry. So I think everybody got a bit more insights into what AI can do. And of course, starting off with the bill of material being very important in the textile industry. That's also what we keep on saying to our dear customers. So I just wanted to highlight for the next webinars we have next week, we actually have two, because we have once a month or every other month, depending on necessity. We have a German webinar for the ones who of course speak German and want to join. Aisha, she's going to be joined by an ERP solution that we work with in Germany, and they're going to talk about the integration and the collaboration we have there. So that's on Wednesday, June 25th. And then Thursday, the day after, we have our monthly Delogue Uncovered with Serena and Ulla, who will be there live to answer any questions regarding ESG and our PLM solution. You can always, prior to that, ask your questions, send your questions to us, and we will answer those questions in the session. And I think, as far as I heard from Ulla and Serena yesterday, the main topic this time is going to be a lot about our size chart. So if you want to know a bit more about that and dive into how we work with that and a couple of changes we've made, etc., then tune in next week on Thursday. So again, thank you so much, Gustav. It's a pleasure to have you. A pleasure to have everybody here.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody, and I wish you all a very good day.